You won't last a month without my son's fortune, Eleanor hissed, the sharp click of her stilettos echoing on the bare floors of my former office. A pathetic little administrative assistant who caught his eye? You're nothing. I allowed a small, tight smile to form, pushing my glasses up the bridge of my nose. The nameplate on the desk, once engraved with Amelia Reed, executive assistant, was already nestled in the cardboard box by my feet. The walls, stripped of Julian's modern art and my own framed diplomas, felt cavernously empty. It was a deliberate sort of emptiness, the deep breath before the plunge. "Do you have anything to say for your actions?" Eleanor demanded, her perfectly lacquered nails tapping a rapid, impatient rhythm against her crocodile leather handbag. Even at 65, she was a formidable presence, with her severe silver bob and a bespoke tweed suit that probably cost more than my first car. She was a monument to inherited power. "I think you and I are finished here, Eleanor," I said, my voice firmer than I felt. "The important things have already been moved. Before we continue, I just want to say how much I appreciate all of you being on this journey with me. If you're finding strength in these stories of justice and empowerment, please consider subscribing. It costs nothing, and it truly helps our community grow." Now, back to the story. Her sharp eyes darted around the room, desperately searching the barren space for any clue, any sign of my next step. "You actually believe you can just walk away with what belongs to this family? To Sterling Enterprises? I'm only taking what belongs to me." I rose to my feet, smoothing down the simple navy blue dress I wore, the same one I had worn to Julian's funeral 3 weeks prior. What Julian wanted me to have. "That's laughable," she scoffed. "My son's estate is worth over $70 million. You think a nobody from a backwater town deserves a penny of that?" I reached down for my box of belongings, and a wave of memory hit me, pulling me back to my very first day in this exact office, almost 5 years ago. The elevator doors had dinged open on the 40th floor of the Sterling Tower, and a knot of nerves tightened in my stomach. It wasn't the altitude, it was the anticipation. My practical block heels sank into the ridiculously plush carpet as I walked toward the main reception desk. "Amelia Reed for Mr. Sterling," I'd announced, my knuckles white as I gripped the folder with my credentials. The receptionist had given me a dismissive glance. The new assistant, her tone implied a short tenure. "Executive assistant," I had corrected her, though the title was a meaningless distinction to everyone but me. The secret I held was that I dedicated 3 years of my life to the Financial Crimes Division before the sheer weight of bureaucracy and burnout sent me searching for a new path. This job was meant to be my clean slate, simpler, less stressful, but still driven by a sense of purpose. I'd done my homework on Sterling Enterprises, and I'd noticed several transactional patterns that set off my old professional alarms. Nothing I could prove, but enough to stir my investigative instincts. Mr. Julian Sterling's office had been overwhelming on that first day. A corner suite with panoramic windows and abstract paintings that looked like they were worth more than my entire student debt. But Julian himself had been a complete surprise. He was warm, offering me coffee he'd brewed himself instead of having me fetch it. "Sorry for the state of things," he had said, gesturing to a desk of immaculately organized files. "My mother is convinced I need an assistant to manage my creative chaos. The truth is, I just need someone who can manage my mother." I had laughed, having no idea at the time just how true those words would turn out to be. "Do you remember when you had me investigated?" I asked Eleanor now, plucking a stray paperclip from the surface of the empty desk. It was about 3 months after Julian and I began dating. Her chiseled jaw tightened. "A standard precaution. I am obligated to protect my family." "A standard precaution," I echoed. "The private detective you hired was quite thorough," I went on, "but he completely missed my time at the FCD. It's funny, isn't it? You were digging so desperately for any trace of dirt, any proof that I was just sleeping my way into the Sterling fortune, that you overlooked the one thing that actually mattered. What are you talking about?" For the first time, a slight tremor entered her voice. Julian found it quite amusing too when I finally told him, I said, a genuine smile touching my lips at the memory of his deep, rolling laugh. The idea that the great Eleanor Sterling had a former financial crimes investigator working directly under her nose. A shadow of doubt flickered across her features before she masked it with her usual disdain. Whatever little drama you're concocting, this isn't a drama, Eleanor. It never was. Julian and I had started our relationship with a clear professional boundary. I maintained it even as I started to notice his gazes lingering a little too long, his convenient excuses to work late on evenings when I was there finishing up. The company had a strict policy against inter-office dating, and I had every intention of respecting it. It was the annual company gala that shifted everything. Julian had found me on the observation deck, escaping the noise and forced pleasantries inside. "Not a fan of corporate schmoozing?" he'd asked, draping his suit jacket over my shoulders to ward off the evening chill. "I'm not a fan of pretending," I'd replied with brutal honesty. "Everyone in there is angling for something, not celebrating." He'd offered a sad smile, my mother included. She's currently trying to corner the new board members. That night, we talked for hours about anything and everything but Sterling Enterprises. We talked about films, travel, and our mutual appreciation for old soul music. When he asked me out to dinner a few days later, I was hesitant. "I have a rule about not dating my boss," I'd told him. "That's fair," he'd said with a nod. "So, what if I wasn't your boss?" 2 weeks later, I was offered a position in the company's legal department. It was a lateral move with the same salary but a different reporting structure. Our first date wasn't at a Michelin star restaurant. It was at a tiny family-owned Thai place where no one would ever recognize the heir to the Sterling fortune. Julian loved me, I told Eleanor, who was now pacing the room like a predator in a cage. Not because I was an easy target or because I had some hidden ambition. He loved me because I saw him. Not the money, not the family name, just Julian. "Please," she sneered. "You orchestrated the whole thing beautifully. The innocent girl-next-door routine. All those little confessions about being intimidated by our world, while you were mentally cataloging every asset you could get your hands on." I had to give her credit. She was committed to her version of reality. Even as her carefully constructed world was about to shatter, Eleanor Sterling could not fathom being wrong. "You never gave us a chance," I said, stating a simple fact. "I was the secretary who bewitched the heir. Too common, too unrefined, too much of everything you loathe." "You were never good enough for him," she said, her voice like shards of ice. "You still aren't." The day Julian proposed, he'd actually apologized to me in advance for the misery his mother was sure to inflict on our lives. When she flat out refused to attend our small wedding, he was wounded, but not shocked. Every time she accidentally planned a major family function when I was scheduled to be out of town, or placed me at the kids' table during a rare holiday dinner, or referred to me as Julian's current phase, he pulled further and further away from her. What Eleanor failed to grasp was that every act of rejection only solidified our alliance. Every condescending remark and thinly veiled insult had driven Julian to build a life with me, a life completely separate from his family's suffocating expectations. "Let me make something perfectly clear, Eleanor," I said, my voice dropping to a near whisper. "The game you think we're playing ended days ago, and you've already lost." Her immaculate composure finally began to crack. "What is that supposed to mean?" I took a step closer to her, my voice low and steady. "It means that while you were scheming with your lawyers about how to cut me out of Julian's will, I was putting the final touches on the plan he and I created together. It means that your son found your secret offshore accounts in Panama and the British Virgin Islands 8 months ago." Her face turned a sickly, pale gray. "You're lying." "The IRS doesn't seem to think so," I said, glancing at my watch. "In fact, their agents should be serving a warrant at your estate right about now." The wave of comprehension that washed over her face, The dawning horror was worth every ounce of grief and every moment of struggle I had endured. "You didn't just lose your son, Eleanor," I said quietly. "You lost everything, all because you were so blinded by your own prejudice that you couldn't see who I really was or who Julian had become." I walked past her toward the door, turning back for one final look at the once unflappable Eleanor Sterling, now standing speechless and utterly broken in the empty office that had marked my entry into her world. "Goodbye, Eleanor," I said. "Tax evasion carries a hefty sentence. I'd start making calls to your legal team." As I walked toward the elevator, I felt Julian's presence right there with me, his voice a warm echo in my mind. "You did it, Leah. You actually did it." The game was over, and even with the gaping hole in my heart where Julian should have been, I had won. The elevator doors slid shut, sealing Eleanor's world away as I descended from the 40th floor. In my hands, the cardboard box held 5 years of my life. The physical remnants, anyway. The memories that truly mattered were safe in my heart. Julian's grin as he brought me coffee every morning, his laughter on our weekend trips to his cabin upstate, the gentle way his eyes would soften when he spoke about the future we were building. Our origins could not have been more different. I was raised in a modest suburban home in Columbus, Ohio, the daughter of a public school history teacher and a registered nurse. Our family vacations were camping trips to national parks, not getaways to private resorts. My parents instilled in me the value of integrity, hard work, and education, principles that seemed almost foreign in Julian's world of inherited status and corporate maneuvering. Julian had grown up in a sprawling mansion with a full household staff who knew his dietary preferences better than his own mother. His childhood was a series of photo ops, a serious-faced boy in bespoke suits, standing rigidly beside his father at black tie galas and yacht club events. There were very few photos of him just being a kid, messy and laughing. "I was being groomed to take over the company before I could even spell my own name," he told me once, as we were lying in my tiny apartment, the city sounds drifting in through the open window. Every choice was already made for me, with the Sterling legacy in mind. My schools, my friends, even the sports I played. "That sounds suffocating," I had replied, gently running my fingers through his hair. He smiled, a sad, distant look in his eyes. It was just my reality. I didn't know anything else until my first year of college. My roommate invited me to his family's Thanksgiving. They were loud and they argued and they hugged each other. It was messy and it was real. Our family dinners felt like board meetings, just with more expensive silverware. Our courtship had been a slow, careful dance at first. Julian was used to women who were after his money, his status, or the connections he could provide. My complete lack of interest in those things seemed to both confuse and intrigue him. For our third date, he suggested a high-end restaurant where the appetizers cost more than my weekly food budget. "I'd rather we try that new ramen place downtown," I'd countered. "The one everyone's been raving about." We ended up squeezed into a tiny booth, laughing as broth splattered on our clothes while Julian had what he called his first real food epiphany. "How have I lived my whole life without this?" he'd asked, a look of genuine wonder on his face. "Because you live in a bubble?" I'd teased him. "A very fancy, very well-insulated bubble." Bit by bit, I pulled Julian into my world. We went to matinee movies, browsed weekend flea markets, and experienced the unique satisfaction of assembling a piece of IKEA furniture with nothing but an Allen key and sheer frustration. In turn, he became my guide through the treacherous landscape of his reality. He taught me the unspoken codes of high society, the exhausting performance of extreme wealth, and the subtle wars waged beneath layers of polite conversation. "You don't have to change a thing for them," Julian had insisted before my first official Sterling family dinner. "Just be yourself." "Your mother already despises me," I'd reminded him, adjusting his tie. Maybe I should just lean into it and pretend to be someone completely different. The dinner was even worse than I'd imagined. Eleanor had interrogated me about my family background as if I were a thoroughbred horse. When she found out my father taught at a public high school, she physically winced. "Oh, education is so vital," she'd said, her voice dripping with condescension. "I suppose public institutions serve a certain purpose for the community." Under the table, Julian squeezed my hand, our silent signal that we were a team. 6 months later, I took Julian home to meet my parents. My father grilled him about football, while my mother insisted on giving him a third helping of her famous chicken pot pie. By the end of the night, Julian was on the living room floor helping my little brother with his algebra homework. Later that evening, in the guest room my mother had set up for him, separate from mine, of course, with a pointed comment about respecting her house rules, Julian whispered to me, "I've never felt so normal. It's an incredible feeling." After a year together, Julian proposed on a random Tuesday night in my apartment. There was no grand gesture, no fancy restaurant, just the two of us with takeout boxes on the coffee table when he suddenly slid off the couch and onto one knee. "I don't want the life they've planned for me," he'd said, his voice thick with emotion. "I want a real life, a life with you." The ring had belonged to his grandmother. It wasn't a massive diamond like the one Eleanor wore, but a classic understated sapphire that had belonged to his father's mother, the one member of the family who had married for love, not for a merger. The wedding was small, at least by sterling standards. We had 80 guests instead of 500. We chose a beautiful botanical garden instead of the family's preferred country club. My dress was an off-the-rack find that my mother's friend had altered to perfection. The night before our wedding, Eleanor called. "Julian, darling." Her voice oozed with false concern through the speakerphone. It's not too late to reconsider this. The prenuptial agreement as it's written leaves you dangerously exposed. This woman could take you for half of everything. "Mother, Amelia is sitting right here," Julian had replied, his tone perfectly even. "And we've already signed the prenup that your own lawyers drafted. I'm just protecting your interests. This girl—" "My fiancée," he corrected her firmly. "She's not from our world, Julian. She doesn't understand the responsibilities, the legacy." "Good," he'd retorted. "Our world could use a breath of fresh air." The wedding day was bright and sunny, marked by one very conspicuous absence. Eleanor sent a large, ornate vase with a curt note expressing her regrets, citing a last-minute, unavoidable board meeting. Julian was hurt, but he hadn't expected anything different. My parents, in contrast, embraced him as their own son, their genuine warmth filling the void his mother had left. The pressure never let up, even after we were married. About 6 months into our marriage, Julian came home from a lunch meeting with his mother, his face pale and drawn. "She's threatening to vote against my appointment as CEO at the next board meeting," he explained, his hands shaking as he loosened his tie. "She claims my unfortunate marriage is damaging shareholder confidence." He let out a bitter laugh. Apparently, a messy, high-profile divorce would be better for the company's image than a stable, happy marriage to someone without the right last name. "What did you say to her?" I asked, my own heart pounding in my chest. I told her she was free to vote however she wanted, but if she ever disrespected my wife again, she wouldn't just lose her voting proxy. She would lose her son. His voice was resolute, his determination absolute. Every challenge she threw at us just made us stronger. When Eleanor started a rumor that I was pregnant before the wedding, I wasn't. We just laughed it off. When she forgot to include me on the invitation list for the annual Sterling Foundation Gala, Julian declined his own invitation. When she slid a check across her massive mahogany desk, offering to buy me out of the marriage, I tore it in half and walked out without a word. What Eleanor could never comprehend was that her campaign against me had forged an unbreakable bond between us. Julian and I were more than just husband and wife. We were allies, united against a world determined to tear us apart. Our different backgrounds, once a point of contention, became our greatest strength. My pragmatism balanced his idealism. His resources helped fuel my ambitions. Together, we built something that neither of us could have managed alone. A true partnership founded on mutual respect, shared principles, and a deep, unwavering love. It was something that Eleanor, for all her wealth and influence, had never known. In Julian's final months, as he began to uncover his mother's web of deceit, that partnership would become more crucial than either of us could have ever imagined. The phone call came at 2:17 a.m. on a Tuesday in March. "Mrs. Reed?" The voice on the other end was calm, clinical, and unfamiliar. "This is Dr. Evans from St. Michael's General. I'm afraid there's been an accident. It involves your husband, the rain-slicked interstate, a semi-truck driver who had drifted across the median." Julian had been driving back from a late meeting in the city. They told me his death was instantaneous. The next few hours were a surreal nightmare. The blindingly white hospital corridor, the forms they needed me to sign, the small plastic bag with Julian's personal effects. His wedding band was still warm from his skin when I slipped it onto my thumb. I drove home in the gray, pre-dawn light, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles ached. Our house, the modest 4-bedroom we had deliberately chosen over one of the sprawling Sterling properties, was exactly as we'd left it. 2 coffee mugs in the sink, Julian's running shoes by the back door. His laptop was open on the kitchen island, waiting for him to return and finish the work he'd planned for the morning. I collapsed onto our bed and buried my face in his pillow, which still smelled faintly of his shampoo. The doorbell rang at precisely 7 a.m. I hadn't slept or moved. Through the peephole, I saw Eleanor's perfectly styled silhouette, her driver waiting by the Blacktown car at the curb. Amelia. Her voice was devoid of emotion, her eyes completely dry. She was already dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit, as if she'd been prepared for this moment. I've handled the arrangements. There was no, "I'm so sorry," no acknowledgement of our shared loss, no hug for the woman her son had loved. "Arrangements," I repeated, my voice hollow. "For the funeral, it will be Saturday at St. James Cathedral. The family crypt is being prepared." She brushed past me into our home, her critical gaze sweeping over the space. She had once called it quaintly modest, her tone dripping with disdain when Julian had given her the tour. "I've also taken the liberty of drafting the obituary," she continued, placing a manila folder on the entryway table. "Of course, the board will need to name an interim CEO immediately." I just stared at her, numb with shock. My husband had been dead for less than 6 hours, and she was already maneuvering to secure her corporate empire. The funeral was a grotesque spectacle of wealth and power. Eleanor had vetoed my request for a small private service. Instead, the cathedral was overflowing with executives, business partners, and socialites, many of whom Julian had actively disliked. I sat in the front pew, my dress damp with silent tears, as Eleanor held court like a grieving queen, accepting condolences with rehearsed solemnity. Her eulogy was all about the sterling legacy and Julian's unwavering dedication to the family business. She never once mentioned our marriage, our home, or the life we had built for ourselves. My father held my hand throughout the entire service. My mother kept her arm wrapped around my shoulders, her eyes shooting daggers at Eleanor across the flower-draped coffin. She didn't even bother to ask what music he would have wanted. My mother whispered furiously as the organist played a selection of somber, traditional hymns that Julian would have despised. That evening, back at our house, while distant relatives and business acquaintances mingled downstairs, I found myself standing in our closet, staring at Julian's side. His favorite faded university sweatshirt hung next to the bespoke suit he had worn with such reluctance. I buried my face in it, trying to breathe in the last traces of him when my phone vibrated with a text from an unknown number. "Mrs. Reed, this is Arthur Vance, your husband's personal attorney. It is imperative that we meet in private before the will reading tomorrow. Urgent. Please call me." The reading of Julian's will was held in the oak-paneled conference room of Vance Associates the next morning. Eleanor sat directly across from me, flanked by 3 grim-faced lawyers from Sterling Enterprises. My parents were beside me, my father's hand resting protectively on my arm. Arthur Vance, a kind-eyed man with silver hair, had met with me privately an hour before. What Mr. Sterling has done is going to cause a significant disruption, he had warned me. Are you ready for this? I had nodded, still numb and unsure of what he meant until he showed me the documents Julian had prepared. The plan was stunning in its precision. Now, as Mr. Vance cleared his throat and began to read, I watched Eleanor's face. Her expression of dignified sorrow remained perfectly intact until he reached the 3rd paragraph. To my beloved wife, Amelia Claire Reed, I bequeath all of my personal assets, including but not limited to our primary residence, all investment portfolios, and my controlling shares in Sterling Enterprises, which amount to 42% of the company's total voting stock. Eleanor's head snapped up. That's not possible. Mr. Vance continued reading, ignoring her outburst. To my mother, Eleanor Grace Sterling, I leave my collection of first edition classic novels, which she gave to me on my 21st birthday, along with my sincere hope that she one day finds a measure of peace. The room fell completely silent. One of Eleanor's lawyers leaned over and whispered frantically in her ear. All the color drained from her face. This is absurd, she finally managed to say, her voice tight with rage. Julian would never. Mrs. Sterling, I can assure you that your son prepared these documents himself, in a sound state of mind and with full legal counsel, Mr. Vance replied calmly. These changes to his will were executed and notarized 3 months ago. Without consulting the family trust? Without consulting me? Eleanor's voice was rising, sharp and shrill. The trust provisions state that Mr. Sterling, as the primary beneficiary, had full authority to restructure his assets upon his 35th birthday, Mr. Vance explained, sliding a document across the polished table, which he did 14 months ago. The fallout was swift and merciless. Before the funeral flowers had even wilted, Eleanor's legal team was filing motions to contest the will, claiming I had exerted undue influence and that Julian had not been mentally competent. When that failed to gain any traction, they tried to invoke obscure bylaws in the company charter. 3 days after the funeral, I came home from a meeting with Arthur Vance to find the locks on our house had been changed. A security guard I didn't recognize informed me that Mrs. Sterling Sr. had ordered a security audit of all Sterling-owned properties. You have no right to do this, I'd said, my voice trembling more with fury than with fear. I have every right, Eleanor had replied, appearing in the doorway, her expression cold and triumphant. This house is technically held by Sterling Estates, a separate holding company. Your name is not on the deed. She was wrong, and it was a mistake Arthur Vance corrected with a single phone call. Julian had quietly transferred the property title into my name 6 months prior. The following day, I arrived at Sterling Enterprises to find my security pass had been deactivated. My personal effects from Julian's executive office were packed in cardboard boxes and stacked in the lobby. A courtesy, the head of security told me, unable to meet my gaze. Mrs. Sterling thought you would want to retrieve these before the transition is complete. The war escalated with each passing day. Eleanor began calling board members, investors, and even our mutual friends, planting seeds of doubt about my emotional state and questionable financial acumen. She called for an emergency board meeting to protect the company's interests during this turbulent period. What she didn't know was that I had already held private meetings with 5 of the 9 board members, guided by a list of names and notes that Julian had left with his attorney. The emergency meeting did not go as she had anticipated. A week after Julian's funeral, as a cold rain streaked down the windows of our home, Arthur Vance arrived with a small, plain envelope. He wanted you to have this after the initial unpleasantness had subsided, the attorney said, handing me a key to a safe deposit box and an address. The next morning, I drove to a downtown bank. A somber bank employee led me into the vault, confirmed my identity, and then left me alone in a small private room with the metal box. Inside, there was a sealed envelope addressed to me in Julian's familiar handwriting, a small USB drive, and a velvet jewelry box. My hands trembled as I opened the letter. My dearest Leah, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone, and Mother has revealed her true nature. I am so sorry to leave you to deal with her alone, but I've done everything in my power to protect you and to finally hold her accountable for her actions. On this drive, you will find the results of an 8-month investigation. Mother has been siphoning company funds into offshore accounts for years. We're talking tax evasion, falsified reports, a network of shell corporations. It started small after Dad passed away, but it's grown into something massive and deeply criminal. I couldn't confront her directly while I was still gathering the evidence. And to be honest, I was afraid of what she would do if she felt cornered. So I made a plan. Everything you need is here. The jewelry box contains my grandmother's sapphire ring, the one Mother always claimed had been lost years ago. Like me, it never quite fit into the sterling world. Now, it's yours, along with everything else I have to give. I love you more than words can say. You showed me what a real family is supposed to feel like. Always, Julian. I opened the small velvet box. The sapphire, a deep, brilliant blue, caught the sterile light of the vault. I slipped it onto my finger next to my wedding band as hot tears blurred my vision. The USB drive contained it all: account numbers, wire transfer records, deeds for offshore holdings, forged authorizations from the board. The very woman who had called me a gold digger had been systematically plundering her own family's company for years. That night, I made a single phone call to a former colleague from the Financial Crimes Division. The war with Eleanor had just entered its final act, and she had no idea it was already over. I spent the entire night immersed in the contents of the USB drive. Each folder I opened revealed another layer of Eleanor's sophisticated fraud. According to Julian's painstakingly organized notes, it had all begun with a single, seemingly minor discrepancy. 8 months before his death, while reviewing quarterly financials, Julian had noticed a payment made to a consulting firm he'd never heard of, Zenith Global Strategies. The amount wasn't huge by sterling standards, only about $200,000, but something about it felt wrong. It was the timing Julian had written in a log file. The payment was processed exactly 3 days after we finalized the acquisition in Brazil. The same deal Mother fought against, only to suddenly change her mind and support it at the last minute. That one loose thread, when pulled, unraveled an entire criminal enterprise. Julian had traced Zenith Global to a shell company registered in Panama, which in turn led to another entity in the British Virgin Islands, which was linked to a private, undeclared account under Eleanor's maiden name. I clicked through folder after folder of scanned documents, screenshots from banking websites, official-looking papers with Eleanor's forged signature, and encrypted email chains with her offshore financial advisors. Julian had even managed to photograph documents from Eleanor's home office during family events, catching glimpses of paperwork when she would step out to take a phone call. Dinner at Mother's estate tonight. Read one entry from 5 months before the accident. She took a call, and I managed to get a clear photo of the Project Nightingale files. The scheme is much larger than I initially suspected. She's been diverting funds for at least 7 years, possibly since Dad's death. My conservative estimate is $30 million, routed through at least 6 different tax havens. The most damning evidence, however, came from a former Sterling accountant who had been fired abruptly 3 years prior. The man had been terrified to speak out until Julian had met with him, promising complete anonymity. He confirmed everything Julian had written. Mother terminated him when he started questioning wire transfers to numbered accounts. She told him they were special, board-authorized investments, but no such authorizations ever existed. He kept copies of the original transfer orders, afraid she would try to frame him someday. Smart man. While building the case against his mother, Julian had been working just as diligently to protect me. There were detailed notes from his consultations with estate attorneys, outlining how he had carefully restructured his holdings to ensure I would inherit everything without a legal fight. He had updated the beneficiaries on every insurance policy, investment fund, and pension plan. He had transferred the deeds to our properties, the titles to his vehicles, and even his prized vinyl collection into my name. "She will fight you for every last dime," he had written. But I have constructed a fortress around our assets that not even Mother's army of lawyers can penetrate. The irony is, her own obsession with aggressive tax avoidance has created the perfect legal precedent. If she challenges the way I've structured my estate, she'll have to expose her own methods. I was in awe of Julian's foresight, his meticulous attention to detail. While maintaining the public facade of a dutiful son and CEO, he had been secretly documenting his mother's crimes and building a firewall to secure our future. The dual life he was leading must have been incredibly stressful, yet his notes never conveyed anger, only a quiet determination mixed with profound sadness. One journal entry, written just 2 months before he died, broke my heart. "Sometimes I see Mother looking at old photographs of Dad and me, and for a fleeting moment I see a glimmer of genuine love in her eyes. I find myself wondering what happened to her when money and control became more important to her than her own family. I keep holding out hope that she'll remember the person she used to be, but I can't risk Leah's future on that hope." By dawn, I had a complete understanding of both Eleanor's crimes and Julian's counter-strategy. Sterling Enterprises had legitimate business operations in numerous countries, which Eleanor had used as a cover to create a complex web of fraudulent transfers. On the surface, it all looked like standard international business. In reality, millions of dollars were being laundered through shell corporations and deposited into private accounts far beyond the reach of U.S. tax authorities. I made a pot of coffee and watched the sun rise over the city, Julian's grandmother's sapphire feeling heavy on my finger. The next steps were clearly outlined in Julian's notes, but carrying them out would require flawless timing and nerves of steel. Eleanor was powerful, well-connected, and utterly ruthless. A single mistake on my part could be catastrophic. First, I had to solidify my position at Sterling Enterprises. Julian had left me with the controlling interest, but Eleanor was already contesting it and actively lobbying the board against me. I needed allies. I spent the next 3 days in discreet meetings with key figures. My first target was Harold Vance, the company's longest-serving board member and Julian's godfather. We met at his lakeside cabin, far from Eleanor's network of spies. I always knew a day like this might come. The old man said with a heavy sigh after I showed him a curated selection of documents from Julian's files. Eleanor changed after Richard passed away. The ambition was always there, but her moral compass vanished. "Will you stand with me?" I asked him directly. "Julian trusted you." "That's all I need to hear," he said, his eyes studying my face. "But be prepared, Amelia. This is not going to be a clean fight. Eleanor will burn this entire company to the ground before she ever admits defeat." By the end of the week, I had secured the support of 5 of the 9 board members. The emergency meeting Eleanor had called to have me ousted resulted instead in a formal vote, recognizing my authority as the majority shareholder. The look on her face as the votes were tallied, shock curdling into pure, cold fury, was an image that would be seared into my memory forever. Next came the financial lockdown. Following Julian's detailed instructions, I worked with Arthur Vance to secure every corporate and personal account that Eleanor might try to access. We changed signatories, updated security protocols, and implemented mandatory 2-factor authentication on all transactions. When Eleanor attempted to transfer $3 million from the company's primary operating account to a contingency fund that only she controlled, the the transaction was immediately flagged and blocked. Mrs. Sterling is most displeased, the CFO told me nervously over the phone, after what he described as a thermonuclear call from Eleanor. Mrs. Sterling will have to learn to adjust to the new reality, I replied calmly. With my position secure and the company's assets protected, it was time for the final phase of Julian's plan, accountability. This was the one part he had left to my judgment with a simple note: justice or mercy. I trust you to make the right call, Leah. I spent a long, sleepless night weighing my options. Should I expose Eleanor publicly, which would destroy the company's reputation and potentially harm its thousands of employees? Or should I handle it privately, allowing her to step down quietly and retain some semblance of dignity? For hours, I wrestled with what Julian would have wanted. Then I remembered something he had said years ago when we were discussing a competitor who had been caught in an insider trading scandal. The problem isn't just that he broke the rules, Julian had said. It's that he genuinely believed the rules didn't apply to him. That level of entitlement demands a public consequence. The next morning, I compiled a carefully selected package of evidence, enough to prove criminal intent beyond any doubt, but not so much that it could be traced back to Julian's initial investigation. Then, I contacted David Chen, my former supervisor at the FCD, who was now a senior official at the IRS Criminal Investigation Division. This has to be handled by the book, I told him during our meeting at a quiet coffee shop. Anonymous tip, formal investigation, everything through official channels. He examined the documents, his face a perfect professional poker mask. This would trigger a major investigation, he said. We're talking significant penalties, likely prison time. I understand that. The company itself could face serious repercussions. I'm prepared to cooperate fully to protect the business and its employees, I assured him. This is about the actions of one individual, not the company as a whole. 2 days later, I called for an emergency board meeting to address regulatory compliance issues. The agenda included appointing an independent auditor and forming a new committee on financial governance, moves that would look proactive and responsible when the investigation eventually went public. The anonymous tip was sent to the IRS that same evening, timed perfectly to reach the agency, just as I had solidified my control over Sterling Enterprises. The gears of justice had begun to turn, slowly but surely, all according to the plan Julian had so carefully laid out. As I stood in our bedroom that night, looking at his side of the closet that I still couldn't bring myself to clear out, I whispered, I hope I made the right choice. The sapphire on my finger caught the lamplight as I reached out to touch his favorite sweatshirt, and I could almost hear his voice in reply. You always do, Leah. You always do. 3 weeks after the tip was submitted, I was in Julian's former office reviewing quarterly projections when my assistant knocked on the door. Mrs. Reed, there are federal agents in the lobby. They say they have a warrant. I nodded, my heart hammering against my ribs despite my outward calm. Please show them up right away and call Arthur Vance. Tell him it's happening. The raid was a display of quiet, overwhelming force. About 15 agents in dark suits and windbreakers, with IRS criminal investigation emblazoned on the back, fanned out across the executive floor. They presented warrants for specific financial records, electronic devices, and full access to the company's servers. Employees watched in stunned silence as agents carried out boxes of documents and sealed computers with evidence tape. The lead investigator, a no-nonsense woman named Agent Miller, approached my desk. Mrs. Reed, we are conducting a simultaneous operation at the residence of Eleanor Sterling. I would advise your full cooperation. Of course, I replied, unlocking my computer without hesitation. Sterling Enterprises has nothing to hide. I've already instructed our IT and records departments to provide you with any and all assistance you require. Her expression was unreadable, but I detected a flicker of surprise at my immediate compliance. I should also inform you that we are executing warrants at several international locations, including 4 offshore entities with ties to this company. I understand. Would you like some coffee while you work? It looks like it's going to be a long day. A ghost of a smile touched her lips before her professional mask slipped back into place. That won't be necessary, thank you. All day, I maintained a facade of calm, directing my staff to cooperate while I secretly monitored a text thread with Harold Vance, who had contacts in the local police department. His messages painted a vivid picture of the raid on Eleanor's estate. 7 vehicles at the mansion. Eleanor tried to deny them entry. They showed her the warrant. An hour later, she attempted to make a call to a bank in Switzerland. Agents confiscated her phone. This is not going well for her. By late afternoon, the agents at the office were packing up, having cloned the servers and collected dozens of boxes. I had just signed the last inventory sheet when my personal cell phone rang. Eleanor's name flashed on the screen. "You venomous little snake," she hissed the moment I answered. "Do you have any idea what you have done?" "I believe a team of federal agents is explaining that to you very clearly right now," I replied, my voice cool and even. "They are tearing my home apart. 30 years of my life, violated, all because of some minor accounting issues that could have been handled internally." I closed my office door. Tax fraud on this scale isn't a minor issue, Eleanor. It's a felony. "They're suggesting Julian was involved," she said, her voice suddenly shifting, becoming calculating even in the midst of her crisis. "That's their working theory, that Julian set all of this up before he died, and I was simply maintaining the system he created. He was the CEO after all." My blood ran cold. Her willingness to defile her own dead son's memory to save herself was monstrous. What a convenient story. "It's the most logical conclusion," she pressed. "The prosecutors will see that. The poor, grieving man arranged these accounts to protect his family's assets, then passed away unexpectedly before he could explain the situation. A tragic misunderstanding. Is that really your strategy? To blame your dead son for your own crimes? It's called survival, Amelia, a concept you seem to understand quite well." Her voice hardened again. "Meet me at the house in 1 hour. We need to align our stories before this gets any worse. There is no our story, Eleanor. There is only the truth. Don't be a fool. You're implicated in this now that you're in charge of the company. We are in this together, whether you like it or not." I thought of Julian, of his meticulous plans, and of the justice he deserved. 1 hour, I agreed. We'll talk. Eleanor's mansion was in chaos when I arrived. Drawers were pulled open, their contents spilled onto priceless antique furniture. She was sitting in the library, a glass of whiskey trembling in her hand, looking a decade older than she had that morning. "They took everything," she said, not bothering with a greeting. "Computers, phones, even my passport. That's standard procedure in a federal investigation." She tossed back the rest of her drink. "I've already put in a call to Senator Reynolds. This will be contained by tomorrow morning." I sat down in the armchair opposite her. "Your political connections can't stop this, Eleanor. The evidence is overwhelming. Evidence can be spun," she snapped, leaning forward. "Listen to me. If Julian arranged these accounts..." "He didn't. If he did," she continued, her voice sharp, "and I was merely maintaining them after his death, this whole thing becomes a minor issue of improper financial reporting, not deliberate fraud." I took an envelope from my handbag and placed it on the table between us. "Julian discovered your offshore network 8 months before he died. He documented everything. Every date, every amount, every account number. He has recordings of your calls with advisors in Panama. He has photographs of documents from this very office. He has sworn statements from the employees you threatened into silence." The color drained from her face as she stared at me. "He knew everything, Eleanor, which means I know everything. You can't prove..." "The IRS already has enough to charge you with tax evasion, wire fraud, and money laundering. They don't need my help." I opened the envelope and spread a few key pieces of Julian's evidence on the table. But if you dare to tarnish Julian's name, if you even suggest he was complicit in your schemes, I will make sure every single document, every recording, and every photograph becomes public record." She stared at the papers, a flicker of recognition in her terrified eyes. He wouldn't betray his own mother. He gave you every chance to do the right thing. You chose this. You chose money over your relationship with your son. You chose it over ethics, over the law. Her proud facade finally shattered, revealing not remorse, but raw, primal fear. "What do you want from me? I want you to take responsibility, plead guilty, pay back what you stole, and serve whatever sentence they give you with a shred of dignity. You expect me to go to prison?" she asked, her voice rising with disbelief. "I expect you to face the same consequences as anyone else." I gathered the documents and stood up to leave. Julian deserved a better mother than one who would try to blame him for her crimes from beyond the grave. "And you think you've won?" she said, her voice filled with bitterness. "The little secretary who stole my son and my company. I didn't steal anything, Eleanor, and neither did Julian. We earned what we built together." I walked toward the door. "The difference between you and me is that I would give it all back in a second just to have him here again." In the weeks that followed, Eleanor's world systematically crumbled. She was indicted on 17 federal counts. The court froze most of her personal assets. Her powerful friends suddenly had trouble recalling their close relationship with the Sterling matriarch. Guided by Arthur Vance, I began the difficult process of restructuring Sterling Enterprises, implementing new, transparent financial practices, and establishing a robust ethics oversight committee. The company weathered the storm surprisingly well, especially after I made it clear that Eleanor's crimes were hers alone and that the new leadership was fully committed to cooperating with the authorities. 6 months after the raid, Eleanor accepted a plea agreement. She pleaded guilty to 3 counts in exchange for a significantly reduced sentence. The Evening News ran a clip of her leaving the courthouse, her head held high despite the circumstances. She was sentenced to 28 months in a minimum security federal facility, along with millions in fines and restitution. That same week, I finalized the charter for the Julian Reed Sterling Foundation, an organization dedicated to funding financial literacy programs in underserved communities. The irony was not lost on me. I was using the proceeds from Eleanor's restitution to teach others the importance of ethical financial stewardship. "He would have loved this," my mother said when I told her. "Taking something so broken and using it to build something beautiful." A year to the day after Julian's death, I stood at his gravesite with a bouquet of fresh flowers. The polished granite still seemed too new, too final. "We did it," I whispered, tracing the letters of his name with my fingertips. "She's facing the consequences. The company is stable, and it's being run with integrity. The foundation has already funded its first 3 programs." I paused, a familiar tightness in my throat. "I miss you every single day, but I'm finding my way." The autumn wind rustled the leaves in the trees overhead as I placed a small, smooth stone on top of his headstone, a tradition my father had taught me, a simple sign that someone had visited, that a life was still remembered. Back at our house, still our home, though I had finally found the strength to pack away the clothes on his side of the closet, I sat on the porch swing with a glass of wine. Tomorrow would bring its own set of challenges: a board meeting, decisions for the foundation, the simple act of navigating another day without Julian. But in the ashes of my grief, I had discovered a strength I never knew I possessed. Eleanor had underestimated me from the very beginning. She saw the gold-digging secretary and was blind to everything else, never realizing that the person she dismissed would be her undoing. She never understood that true power doesn't come from a family name or a bank account, but from integrity and a sense of purpose. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow on the trees that Julian and I had planted together, I raised my glass in a silent toast to justice, to turning grief into purpose, to the love that had changed my life, and to the woman I had become. The end of the story